I swore an oath to uphold the laws of our nation, and that is exactly what I will do. All Americans were rightly sickened and revolted by the brutal death of George Floyd. My administration is fully committed that for George and his family, justice will be served. He will not have died in vain. But we cannot allow the righteous cries and peaceful protesters to be drowned out by an angry mob. The biggest victims of the rioting are peace-loving citizens in our poorest communities. And as their president, I will fight to keep them safe. I will fight to protect you. I am your president of law and order and an ally of all peaceful protesters. But in recent days, our nation has been gripped by professional anarchists, violent mobs, arsonists, looters, criminals, rioters, Antifa, and others. A number of state and local governments have failed to take necessary action to safeguard their residents. Innocent people have been savagely beaten, like the young man in Dallas, Texas, who was left dying on the street, or the woman in upstate New York viciously attacked by dangerous thugs. Small business owners have seen their dreams utterly destroyed. New York's finest have been hit in the face with bricks. Brave nurses who have battled the virus are afraid to leave their homes. A police precinct has been overrun here in the nation's capital. The Lincoln Memorial and the World War II Memorial have been vandalized. One of our most historic churches was set ablaze. A federal officer in California, an African-American enforcement hero, was shot and killed. These are not acts of peaceful protest. These are acts of domestic terror. The destruction of innocent life and the spilling of innocent blood is an offense to humanity and a crime against God. America needs creation, not destruction. Cooperation, not contempt. Security, not anarchy. Healing, not hatred. Justice, not chaos. This is our mission, and we will succeed. 100%, we will succeed. Our country always wins. That is why I am taking immediate presidential action to stop the violence and restore security and safety in America. I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights. Therefore, the following measures are going into effect immediately. First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. I am also taking swift and decisive action to protect our great capital, Washington, D.C. What happened in this city last night was a total disgrace. As we speak, I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers, military personnel, and law enforcement officers to stop the rioting, looting, vandalism, assaults, and the wanton destruction of property. We are putting everybody on warning. Our 7 o'clock curfew will be strictly enforced. Those who threaten innocent life and property will be arrested, detained, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want the organizers of this terror to be on notice that you will face severe criminal penalties and lengthy sentences in jail. This includes Antifa and others who are leading instigators of this violence. One law and order, and that is what it is. One law. We have one beautiful law. And once that is restored and fully restored, we will help you, we will help your business, and we will help your family. America is founded upon the rule of law. It is the foundation of our prosperity, our freedom, and our very way of life. But where there is no law, there is no opportunity. Where there is no justice, there is no liberty. Where there is no safety, there is no future. We must never give in to anger or hatred. If malice or violence reigns, then none of us is free. I take these actions today with firm resolve and with a true and passionate love for our country. By far, our greatest days lie ahead. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to pay my respects to a very, very special place. Thank you very much.
That is U.S. President Donald Trump outside of the White House making a very brief statement about the demonstrations that are taking place as we speak. You can see in the corner of your screen a live shot in the very city the president just delivered those remarks in D.C. A lot of confrontation over the last 20 minutes between protesters and police, and we can go over the reasons why. The president outlined many of them. I want to bring in my colleague, the CBC's Katie Simpson, who was watching alongside me. Katie, a number of things jump out at me. First of all, the president called what is happening with those protests domestic terrorism. And then he was going to say, he said he was going to take strong unilateral action to end it. Go over for us the two things he outlined that his government is prepared to do to quash these protests.
Well, certainly anyone who's in Washington right now has noticed the increased military presence, and Donald Trump announcing that thousands and thousands of members of the military are here in Washington to shut down protests. And what we saw, and the reporting throughout the day has been that the protests in front of the White House, in front of Lafayette Square, had been peaceful all day. And then we saw police move in, police on horseback. We saw the tear gas going into the crowd to clear the streets out. There is a curfew that takes effect in Washington in 9 minutes. And the president made it absolutely clear he wants to see the protests, the destruction that happened in Washington, D.C. He wants to see that end. He does not want to see that repeat. It echoes what he said to governors earlier today, warning them that they need to crack down on protesters or risk looking like, and I quote, a jerk, saying that there needs to be stiff penalties for individuals who are caught looting, who are caught vandalizing property, and Donald Trump describing what happened in Washington in particular last night as a disgrace. That has not done anything, his words have not done anything to change what's going on in the streets of D.C. right now.
You can see it. Our viewers can see it right there on the screen.
We're looking at live pictures of people taking a knee, hands up, some of them, as they stand a line by protester or by police. Now, the big question is, in 8 minutes from now, what happens when we start to see that the curfew is there? Donald Trump announcing that the curfew will be strictly enforced. Earlier, we had heard from the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, and she had said that the National Guard would work in conjunction with local police, but Donald Trump announcing that the military is here. There are thousands upon thousands of troops, he says. We've seen large, heavy armored vehicles in and around Pennsylvania Avenue. So the president wants the streets cleared, despite the protests throughout today being mostly peaceful. The reporting saying there had not been any sort of escalation in tensions there. And now we are seeing these pictures live of people with their hands up in the streets, even though the curfew is set to start in 7 minutes. And it does not look like they are having any plans to go anywhere anytime soon, even though police in full riot gear are there in the streets. I'm actually just going to take a look behind me up the street. we're in a position. Our office is very close to the White House. It's about 3 blocks away, maybe at most. And what is so strange, even though this is the time of COVID, there at least is like a little bit of traffic in and around this area. Everything has been shut down. There is no one on the street in and around behind me. And I'd seen a number of police vehicles kind of go up and down the street today, and protesters have kind of been circling in and around this area. But right now, things are eerily quiet.
And you can see on the screen there that things are quiet, sort of at this moment of calm, whereas you mentioned, Katie, a number of protesters have taken a knee. I want to bring back Roy Alston. He's a former member of the Dallas Police Department in Texas. He's also written an extensive amount of analysis on what happened in 2014 in the demonstrations in Ferguson in Missouri. Hi, Roy. Thanks for being with us. I know you listened to the president. You're watching this scene unfold. What the president described was sort of an increase in militarization. The very thing we had been talking about prior to his remarks, the idea that there will be extra, military, if necessary, out there beyond the police. How do you anticipate that will, I guess, what kind of impact might that have on the scenes we're watching unfold right now?
So what I think will happen is we're going to see this increase in levels of violence. So one of the things the president mentioned, and you guys mentioned earlier, protests during the day have mostly been very peaceful. People in America have a right to protest the government, and they have a right to do it very peacefully. What we find and what we discovered in protests and mass protests in 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, where there are individuals who have a stake in what's happening locally, but there are individuals who are infringing upon their right to protest peacefully by coming in and setting the stage for violence. These individuals, chances are, don't even live in the communities that are burning and they're looting or causing criminal activity. They're just there to really agitate. So there's clearly a distinction between those people who are protesting peacefully and those individuals who want to match the force that the president has described and create the type of violence that will play on TV and in the news stations all day tomorrow and next day. They're creating content. And when the police show up in their militarized way, they are becoming an unwitting character in a reality TV show in which they have no control over the script. And so we have to be very careful about these lines in the sand where we say exactly at 7 o'clock we're gonna crack down on individuals. Well, some of those individuals are peaceful protesters who are really trying to get home and who are trying to end up in the mess of things. So we have to acknowledge the fact that there are literally two groups here: those who want to protest legally, lawfully, and peacefully, and those individuals who are willing and able to stand by and create the type of news content that will play over and over and over again, and they can use that to spin whatever their message or whatever they're trying to accomplish. And in essence, they're diluting what's happening with the peaceful protest. They're diluting the message of what really happened when George Floyd was killed by the Minneapolis police officer. They're diluting that message with the violence. And that's what I think really kind of frustrates the average person. Yeah. But for us in law enforcement, we knew this in 2014. We knew this in 2015. For us to be poorly prepared for that today is almost unexcusable. But I recognize that is a huge challenge that each of these communities face. And I'm not there tactically on the ground with any of these police departments, so I don't want to usurp or second guess what they're doing. But we learned this lesson already. When we show up militarized, there are people who are willing to perpetrate violence in order to create the type of content that's going to play in the media over and over and over again that they can spin for their own political or personal or whatever agenda they happen to have. And that dilutes the message the peaceful protesters are trying to get across. Peaceful protesters don't want police brutality. But the notion of police brutality is being lost in all of this violence and crime that's happening for those protesters that linger after the curfew. Yeah,
that's what I want to ask you. I just have about 30 seconds left. But for those on the ground, if in fact it does become hyper-militarized, and even on the law enforcement side, how do you, they're not really going to, at 7 o'clock in 2 minutes, distinguish between the peaceful protesters and those who aren't, right? How do you?
So that becomes the real dilemma, right? So now it's almost like for those of us who are in the military, it's like being sucked into a fatal funnel, right? You're in this fatal funnel, and all you can do now is really try to survive. The goal really is to be smarter and not find yourself in a fatal tunnel, and use your resources that are available to you. Use the faith-based community, use local leaders, use your church leaders, start communicating to some of these organizers, and let them understand what the challenge, what it is they want to accomplish versus what resources you have to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish, and we all get on the same sheet of music. We continue this escalation of use of force.
Right.
Force. We're going to see more force being used,
Okay.
and it just feeds itself. We have to kind of law enforcement leaders have to be smarter.
I got to leave it here. I'm coming up against the next show. Thanks so much, Roy. Really appreciate your time tonight. Roy Alston is a former member of the Dallas Police Department. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.